Hey guys, welcome back to One Candle Society for another One Candle Paranormal Case File. Here with your hosts Vic Whateley
and Marcus D.
And a big thank you to our Patreons that allowed us to make this video, Sarah and
our newest patron, John. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. And if you guys would like to hear your name called out on our videos, go to our Patreon today and become a patron today.
And now, we're going to take on one of the greatest UFO cases of all time, the Kecksburg UFO incident.
On the evening of December 9th, 1965, thousands of people over 6 states reported seeing a fireball streaking across the sky. The object dropped molten debris across several states, and multiple witnesses reported hearing a sonic boom as it went by. At 4:50 p.m., several citizens of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, reported seeing the object crash into the woods with a plume of blue smoke rising from the trees. One of the first to the scene was volunteer fireman James Romansky. He described seeing an almost perfectly intact, acorn-shaped, metallic object. He said it was 11 to 12 feet long, and it was one solid piece of metal, save for the base, which bulged out with symbols on it which Romansky described as hieroglyphic in appearance. Also on the scene first was local radio station journalist John Murphy. Murphy claimed to have photographed the crash as well as taken several first-hand accounts of the events that night. Within almost an hour or so, local law enforcement had arrived and quarantined the area as military officials arrived to take control of the situation. John Hayes, who was 10 years old at the time of the incident, reported that military officials had set up a command center in his home. He stated that he saw about 6 men in radiation suits walking to and from the woods that night. Multiple eyewitnesses in the town reported that a large military flatbed truck with a tarp over it hauled something out of town that night. Official documents now let us know that the object was eventually taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. However, the object was never seen by the public again. Following the incident, journalist John Murphy's wife claimed that her husband was approached by government officials and all of his photographs and interview materials was seized by the government. On top of all that, he would later die in a mysterious hit-and-run car accident 4 years later. Until 2005, the U.S. government's position on Kecksburg that night was that the object that crashed was a meteor. After 2005, some NASA officials attempted to claim that the object was in fact a piece of Cosmos 96, a Russian satellite that had malfunctioned and crashed into Canada, leaving debris in its wake. However, multiple sources argue that this theory is highly unlikely.
And before we go too far, one of the things we have to talk about is Cosmos 96. This is a satellite that was launched by the Russians on November 23rd, 1965. And the original intent of this launch was for a probe to explore around Mars. But they missed their launch window and it wasn't going to happen. They quickly switched their target to Venus. But once it got out there, there was a malfunction in the fuel line and it wasn't going to make it to Venus either. It ended up floating around in orbit for a while and then returned to Earth. This is important for a few reasons. First of all, a lot of people have blamed Cosmos 96 as being the actual culprit of what crashed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. The other reason is, well, it looks a lot like the description of what crashed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. It had a general acorn or bell-like shape, it had a band of writing around it, it was metal, and it pretty well matched the general size. But it probably wasn't. First, it broke up over Canada and crash landed there. Also, if it was going to land in Pennsylvania, it would have passed over Pennsylvania at 6:20 a.m. Instead, the Kecksburg incident occurred at 4:50 p.m., making it very unlikely that these two similarly shaped objects had anything to do with each other.
So this is just the beginning of where things get shady with what the government is telling us. The Kecksburg UFO incident is riddled with incidents of the government being just shady. So shady, in fact, we need some kind of device. We need some kind of way to measure the number of times the government is being shady. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the shady as owls counter. If you're wanting to know why owls are shady, I recommend going back to season 2 and just watching from there, and you'll start to understand. And the shadiness is so bad, it is even continued into the new millennium. The Kecksburg UFO incident is one of the most heavily investigated UFO incidents in modern history. Let's talk about the fact that investigative journalist Leslie Kean, who was trying to investigate the Kecksburg UFO incident for the Sci-Fi Channel, actually sued the government under the Freedom of Information Act in 2002, trying to get records from NASA about the Kecksburg UFO incident. NASA dragged their feet for 7 years. I'm going to say it again, 7 years, until 2009, when a judge had to court order them to do a better job of providing information to Leslie about providing information to the public about the Kecksburg UFO incident. And one of the most shadiest parts about this whole deal is that NASA just claims, we lost 2 boxes of documents. Don't know where they went. Regarding one of the hugest UFO incidents in history. NASA can't even keep their story straight on what the Kecksburg UFO was. Let's keep in mind, up until 2005, they said that it was a meteor. After 2005, they said it was a piece of debris from Cosmos 96, even though all of science says that that's impossible and not likely.
Speaking of it being a meteor, we have a few problems with that one. One of the first parts is that it came in at a very low, shallow orbit. Not impossible for a meteor, but not the most common way you're going to see a meteor come down. You don't normally see a meteor streak across multiple states. It does happen, but most of the time you're not going to see something like that. Most of the time with meteors, you get something small. Something like the size of a pebble, something like the size of a speck of dirt. That's what most of them end up being. Something the size of, say, a large rock or a beach bar, much rare. And something this big is very, very, very rare. Beyond that, there's a lot of accounts of it changing trajectory and elevation. Something that meteors definitely don't do. One witness claimed it appeared to have almost stalled while attempting to go over one of the mountains and seemingly had to try a second time to get over it. Definitely not something characteristic of a meteor, just flat out impossible on that part. We can also look at the response from the government. The amount of people who end up showing up is way more than what would standardly be sent out to investigate a meteor. And as a final nail in the coffin to it, the eyewitness descriptions of the object. This seemed to have been a piece of shaped metal with a band with writing. I would say this is only a meteor in the most broad definition of a meteor, which is just simply some matter that falls from space to Earth. But as far as it just being a natural occurring celestial body that slammed into Earth, I don't think so.
If that's the case, that would make this literally one of the most sideways answers that you could possibly get from the government. Technically, it was a meteor. It was from outer space. We're just not saying what exactly it is from outer space. So speaking of random stuff just falling from the sky, Vic, did you know that there was a covert government project dedicated to retrieving foreign objects that fell from space?
Yeah, you've been talking about it all day. As a matter of fact, you won't shut up about it.
Yeah, because it's cool. So guys, in the 1950s, the United States started something called Project Moondust. Side note, one of the coolest names for a government project. What Project Moondust was tasked with was covertly retrieving foreign objects that fell from space. So what they did was they were sent out in order to retrieve foreign satellites, probes, and failed rockets that crashed within the United States. They were tasked with going out, recovering these objects covertly, bringing them back to the Air Force so that the United States could study the technology that they found. Now, why did they have to do this covertly? Well, because the United States and the Soviet Union kind of had a treaty where they agreed to give each other their stuff back, but we kind of wanted to see how their toys worked. So the faster we got it, the longer we could look at it. We go, oh, hey, here it is. Now, why is Project Moondust important? Well, this would kind of explain why there was such a quick and heavy military response to Kecksburg. Going back to Cosmos 96 for a second, the United States government knew that Cosmos 96 was going to crash and probably scatter debris somewhere. So the whole military was probably on high alert for any kind of news about something crashing somewhere. So if it really was just a meteor, this would explain why there was such a quick and heavy response from the military. And it also kind of plays into the theories that what the Kecksburg UFO was some kind of foreign tech device.
A matter of fact, a foreign tech device we've previously talked about on this channel, Die Glocke, or the Nazi bell.
Which, if you want to check out the video on that, you can check out the link in the description below.
Die Glocke was supposedly a German secret super weapon, and it had a very similar design and shape to what supposedly crashed in Kecksburg, kind of an acorn bell-like sort of shape with a band with some sort of hieroglyphics or markings on it. But it supposedly disappeared around the 40s. But we do also have an answer to that. The device was intended to bend time and space. Perhaps it was a Nazi using it to escape or something along those lines, or perhaps they just fired it off so that the Allies wouldn't get it under their control. This just happened to be where in time and space it ended up landing. Unfortunately, we can't draw too many connections between them because we don't know exactly what the Nazi bell looked like, and we don't know exactly whatever landed in Kecksburg looked like, so we don't have the two to compare them. But the reports of the designs are starkly similar.
Yeah, I still think that Die Glocke was an experimental German nuclear warhead, which just ties into one of the prevailing theories about what the Kecksburg UFO actually was. A lot of people think that the Kecksburg UFO was actually either a US or a Russian nuclear warhead, like one of the re-entry vehicles to one of these missiles, because the payload to one of these missiles looks a lot like what they described at Kecksburg.
Yeah, and a payload delivery system actually matches up pretty well to the acorn shape that's reported in Kecksburg. That acorn shape is perfectly designed to disperse the pressure throughout the rest of the form of the object, meaning that instead of like a meteorite that hits the ground and shatters and cracks, the pressure of the impact is spread out through the whole form, allowing it to keep from being crushed when striking the earth. Think about taking an acorn that you just find in nature and just trying to crush it in your hand. It's a lot harder than you'd think it would be.
And if it was the tip of a nuclear device, that would also explain why, eyewitness John Hayes was reporting seeing several men in radiation suits going out into the woods. That would also explain why there's this huge, fast military response, because they need to retrieve this hardware. Especially if it's a foreign nuclear device, that the United States was always trying to desperately get their hands on that kind of technology to see what the Russians had.
Okay, Marcus, you got me on your side, but just answer me this one question. Why would they be testing a nuclear device in their own borders at 5 in the afternoon in Pennsylvania?
I mean, it's not like you can accidentally shoot one of these kinds of missiles. I mean, there are safety checks after safety checks after safety checks that are involved in launching any types of device like this. Okay, it's not something that's going to accidentally happen. That would have been deliberately launched.
I like how much this fits the whole story of Kecksburg, and it seems to answer a lot of questions, except for why would anyone be doing this? Well, I guess we're down to one last thing to talk about when it comes to this, and that's, well...
Alien.
Yeah, okay, you beat me to the punch. Aliens. Well, one of my first thoughts is, this seems to be kind of small for some sort of landing craft, though. It was generally described to me about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and unless they're just taking a car trip across the Southwest, it seems like they would usually have a bigger device. I almost wonder if this is a probe.
Maybe that's what we shot down with our nuclear missile.
Maybe it is. This seems like the sort of thing that maybe aliens would put in orbit around our planet just to kind of scan, observe, things along those lines. And maybe something went wrong and it ended up crashing into Kecksburg.
That would also probably explain why the government hasn't come forward with what really happened in Kecksburg. Because it's been almost 50 years. You know, if it was a meteorite, if it was a nuclear missile, if it was some kind of a probe, we would know by now. We already know several close times that the United States and the Soviet Union came to almost nuking the crap out of each other. And because of mistakes from one side or the other, we know of several downed space probes that have landed either in the United States or in Russia. We know of several meteors that are in museums. The Kecksburg UFO was never seen again.
Yeah, and think about when we send messages out into space meant for aliens, it's usually not written in English or Chinese or something along those lines. We use symbols to communicate to show that we're thinking beings on this planet. Guys, it's not like they're going to know our language. Communicating through symbols and mathematics really makes more sense.
I have one small problem with your probe idea. There's actually a witness that came forward and claimed that he actually saw a body at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's not super credible. You should probably take it with a grain of salt. But there's a story saying that one of the soldiers at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base saw a body next to the Kecksburg UFO ship and saw a blanket over some sort of body, and all I saw was an arm that had scales like with 3 fingers on it. And let's not forget, several witnesses claim that they heard a loud shriek coming from the woods the night of the Kecksburg UFO incident.
Well, and I guess I don't have a solid answer to that. Maybe it did house some extraterrestrial life in it. Speaking of that, weren't there 3 fingers on the Flatwoods Monster that was kind of in the same general area?
Yeah, that's true, and there's some similarities to the stories. And we've also done a video on the Flatwoods Monster, which you can also check out that video by clicking on the link below in the description.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that just makes me really want to reach for a connection between this case and the Flatwoods Monster, but I really don't think it's there, besides that one incident.
There's a lot in this case that makes me think that the government's being shady and hiding something, because they probably are.
And I'll agree with you there. So I think we're down to our conclusions.
Something happened in Kecksburg that night that the government does not want us to know about. It's more than 50 years later, and they still can't even just give us that it was a meteor. You would put an 11 or 12 foot meteor in a museum. We know that there have been nuclear devices that Project Moondust themselves recovered, and they're still not telling us what was coming from Kecksburg. We know that Cosmos 96 didn't leave that much debris in Pennsylvania, and they still won't tell us what actually was in Kecksburg. That means something either happened there that the United States government does not want the public knowing. What could that be?
Well, for all the stuff that we've tried to hide over the years and all the stuff that's come forward, I'd imagine it had to be pretty big. I don't think that this was part of a Russian ship. I don't think that it was a meteorite, obviously. What I really think it is I think it really is something that's just straight up extraterrestrial. Mainly because none of the other ideas really make that much sense when you think them all the way out. Also, I think that gives the sort of gravitas that the US government would want to cover up. Because I don't think they want us knowing about this extraterrestrial life. I don't think they want us even thinking about extraterrestrial life unless they're using it as a smokescreen. But we'll leave that for you guys to discuss in the comments below.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out our video on the Kecksburg UFO incident. This is such a huge incident when it comes to ufology. We were so happy to do this video, and there's so much to this story, and even probably a few things that we left out. If there's something we left out, leave it in the comments below.
Yeah, we've been almost teasing at this one for a long time. We mentioned it in our top 5 UFO crashes. We mentioned it in our Nazi Bell video. I'm just glad that we're eventually getting around to this one.
If you guys like this video, don't forget to like, share, and of course, subscribe to the channel, because it really helps us out when you guys do that. And don't forget to hit that little notification bell so that you guys can stay up to date on all the newest One Candle content that we're giving to you guys.
And you know what? If you really, really like us, check out our Patreon. It's got some cool stuff. There's some cool people there.
Yeah, you guys can get things like autographs from me and Vic. You guys can get shout outs on our videos. You guys can even give input on the videos that we're going to produce on the channel.
Actually, pretty soon we're going to be putting up our first poll for people to vote on what content we're going to be releasing in January.
But most importantly, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.
Woo!